Wikileaks founder Julian Assange has been released from a maximum security prison in the UK after spending almost 2,000 days behind bars. Assange reached a plea deal with the United States government after a year-long international standoff over the release of US classified documents in 2010. News of the deal were revealed in a court filing in the Northern Mariana Islands, a US Commonwealth in the Pacific. Let's explore this further now and speak to Heidi Swart, Intelwatch Research Coordinator. Heidi, thank you so much for your time this evening. Your reaction to the latest developments around Julian Assange?
Well, of course, this is fantastic news. It's been a long-term campaign. Civil society organisations, the Australian government, the Australian public especially were behind this campaign. So it's a huge win, I think, for media freedom and for democracy, and of course for the Australian people. It's long overdue. So we are ecstatic, and I think all of the media world should be ecstatic that this has happened.
And staying with, issues around media freedom, I mean, we're having this conversation, for example, at the back of World Whistleblower Day on June the 23rd, and looking at the lengthy legal battle that has sparked discussions on media freedom. How do you see this case influence the landscape of journalistic freedom globally?
Well, we're not out of the woods yet. Because we have to remember that in the end, he wasn't pardoned of any crimes. He took a plea deal. So he did agree to plead. He was going to agree to plead guilty to distributing classified or security material, right? And that's in terms of the US Espionage Act. Why it's good that this is only a plea deal is because it cannot be used by the US courts to set a precedent. The judges can't refer to it and say, yes, okay, well, because you published material that was classified, we can now use that to prosecute other journalists. Because really, that's what he is. He's a journalist. He's not the whistleblower. He didn't actually leak the information. The person who actually leaked the information is Chelsea Manning, who shockingly was also in prison for 7 years. So yes, the problem though is that it sets a trend. It goes into the back of judges' minds, of law enforcement's minds, thinking that, well, he is actually guilty. When in actual fact, all he did was what any other news person would have done with a leaked document. And it's in fact something that journalists do every day. We have people come to us with classified information and we publish it. So yeah, it's a big win, but it's also, we're not out of the woods. And I understand that his wife, Stella, will be calling for a pardon.
Yeah, and speaking about that, Heidi, the fact that as journalists we do get classified information, and we do, sometimes publish this particular information, and it can change the course of history in some of these cases. So from a newsroom perspective then, how do we begin to strike the balance between the public interest with the legal challenges that are also faced by Assange, for example?
So, if you look at what Assange actually released, it was vital information about United States war crimes. And it was most certainly in the public interest to know. That video that you just showed in the background, that was an Apache helicopter that had in fact killed 12 people, and that was in Iraq. And 2 of them were Reuters journalists. Reuters had been trying to get that video from the United States Army, and they weren't able to do that. In the end, WikiLeaks did that. So if you take it from that perspective, legitimate war crimes being exposed, this whole thing has really been a targeted campaign by the United States against Julian Assange, completely sort of knocking it out of perspective in terms of what is in the public interest. It is in the public interest for us to know what war crimes happened, and they, frankly, wanted to cover it up. So in terms of what it means for us here in democracy, I hope that our government will not take a leaf from the book of the American government and take this sort of stance towards public information that's in the public interest coming out into the open. And I hope that they will be more tolerant than the United States government has been in this regard.
Do you see potentially maybe it affecting the willingness of some of the, the journalists to be able to publish some sensitive information, and maybe even whistleblowers from bringing this information to light?
Yes, whistleblowers in particular. I mean, Chelsea Manning did not win in this round. I mean, she was persecuted, put in isolation. It was a heavy, a 17-year sentence in that sort of prison is heavy. Even for Assange, this has been 12 years ago. He went into the Ecuadorian embassy where he had sought some sort of clemency. This has only ended now after 5 years in a UK prison in London. So it is still, if you think of the effort that it took to get Assange free, you cannot see that happening for an ordinary low-profile journalist. So in the end, while yes, it's a victory, but I think in the back of all of our minds, and certainly in South Africa as well, we have our new, the cybercrimes law, we have our very strict apartheid legislation that you can get locked up for if you reveal classified information and so forth. We are. I know this for a fact. To myself, the journalist I've worked with, we are not really happy with the way things are, and we are very skittish about publishing material. I mean, I myself have had a warning letter from the State Security Agency that they're going to persecute me because I've got some classified document. So even if it is in the public interest. So we are a journalist. We are still skittish, and I can tell you now that even though he is now free, this has really, I think, had a deterring effect.
And Heidi, I mean, I'm going to stay with what you've said about, being in possession of those classified documents, and of course the letter that you then received. That also, leaves one not only sometimes in instances determined to publish the information, but in some instances you are rattled.
Yeah, it does rattle you immensely when you get a letter from the State Security Agency citing a 1980-something apartheid law saying that they might consider locking you up for 10 years if you don't give them the document that you have. And in particular, if the document that you have is sort of some generic strategy document that is available, the policy of which is already available in the public domain. So to be threatened in that way, it does. I can say it ruined my weekend, and it ruined my editors. Well, my editor didn't also, really enjoy it very much. And fortunately, they didn't go forward with it because they didn't want. I think they wouldn't have wanted any kind of media issues. Much for the same reason why I think that Assange was now sort of quietly, sent off to the Northern Mariana Islands to appear before a US judge there, because that is in the US jurisdiction, because the elections are coming up in the US and the UK, and I think they want to just move this quietly out of the way. So in both cases, I think it's the media in the end that people have to rely on, to give us some sort of shielding from these sort of intelligence practices, where they want to keep the public interest quiet.
Yeah, and Heidi, of course, this is, a very, very big moment. And as you say, it's really just raised some serious questions. I mean, one thinks about Edward Snowden, for example, and those revelations, that really sparked global debates on surveillance. And then at the same time, now we're seeing this particular matter. So lots of parallels being drawn up here. But thank you so much for talking to us this evening. Do appreciate it. And let's see then what happens. That was Heidi Swart, Intelwatch Research Coordinator.